Welcome to our deep dive into Ritucharya. We're going to explore this incredible Ayurvedic approach to living in harmony with the seasons.
Yeah.
Most of us instinctively change our clothes with the weather, right?
Yeah.
But what if we shifted our diet and habits with the rhythms of nature, too?
Mm.
That's the heart of Ritucharya, and we're going to unpack it all using this fascinating academic review article on the topic.
It's not just about feeling cozy. Ritucharya is deeply rooted in the Ayurvedic principle of preventative care.
Okay, I'm all about prevention.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the specifics, can you give us a super quick breakdown of Ayurveda itself?
Absolutely. Ayurveda is a holistic healing system from ancient India, and it emphasizes maintaining balance within the body, or swasthya rakshanam.
Wow.
That essentially translates to preservation of health for the healthy, and it's a core concept that drives the practice of Ritucharya.
Preservation of health for the healthy. I love that.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense focusing on keeping well instead of just addressing problems after they arise. So how does Ritucharya fit into this?
Ritucharya is all about living in sync with nature's rhythms to maintain that inner balance.
Okay.
Ritu means season, and charya means regimen. So we're talking about adapting your diet, lifestyle, and even your mindset to the unique qualities of each season.
So it's like personalized wellness based on what's happening in the natural world around us.
Exactly. And the ancient Ayurvedic texts break the year down into 6 seasons, each with its own distinct qualities and effects on the body.
Oh, wow.
Keep in mind that this is based on observations on the Indian subcontinent, but the principles can be applied and adapted to different climates.
6 seasons.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first one. What kicks off the Ayurvedic year?
First up is Shishira, or late winter, which runs roughly from mid-January to mid-March.
Okay.
Picture cold, crisp air, a time for hunkering down and conserving energy.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Here in location, it definitely feels like Shishira right now. So how does Ritucharya guide us to stay balanced during this season?
During Shishira, Vata dosha, which is associated with cold, dryness, and movement, tends to be aggravated. To counter that, Ritucharya recommends incorporating warming and grounding elements into your routine.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about matching the external temperature, but actually addressing how those qualities affect our internal balance.
Precisely. And one of the simplest ways to do this is through diet.
Okay.
Think warming spices like ginger and long pepper, which help to stoke your digestive fire and counter the cold.
Okay, so warm spices in winter. I can definitely get behind that.
Yeah,
It's like Ritucharya is giving us permission to embrace those cozy comfort foods.
exactly. And it's not just about taste. These spices have specific properties that help to balance Vata dosha and promote overall well-being during Shishira.
I'm starting to see how this is so much more than just common sense. It's a deeper understanding of how to work with our bodies and the environment. So after we've hunkered down and embraced the warmth of Shishira, what comes next?
Then we transition into Vasanta, or spring, from mid-March to mid-May.
Okay.
This is a time of renewal when nature starts to awaken after the dormancy of winter.
Spring. That sounds refreshing after a long winter. What shifts do we need to make as the world around us starts to blossom?
Vasanta is considered an ideal time for gentle detox because kapha dosha, which is associated with heaviness and moisture, can accumulate during winter.
Okay.
The texts suggest incorporating lighter foods, bitter greens, and astringent tastes to cleanse and rejuvenate.
Interesting. So it's like we're helping our bodies shed any lingering heaviness from winter and match the lightness and vibrancy of spring.
Exactly. And one traditional practice during Vasanta is a honey-based cleanse. Honey is considered purifying and balancing, and it can help to eliminate accumulated toxins.
A honey-based cleanse. That's definitely more appealing than some of the intense detox methods I've heard of.
Right.
Okay, what's next on our Ritucharya journey after spring's cleanse?
Next up is Grishma, or summer, from mid-May to mid-July.
Oh.
This is when the heat really kicks in, and Pitta dosha, associated with fire and intensity, can become aggravated.
Ah, summertime.
Yeah.
I could already feel the heat in longer days. So how do we stay balanced when the sun is at its most intense?
The key during Grishma is to favor cooling and hydrating practices.
Okay.
Think chilled buttermilk, sweet fruits, and lighter foods that won't weigh you down.
Chilled buttermilk.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds incredibly refreshing on a hot day. It's interesting how Ritucharya seems to align with those natural cravings we have in each season.
It really does. It's
Yeah.
like our bodies already know what they need, but sometimes we need a little reminder to pay attention.
Right.
And speaking of paying attention, the texts also emphasize the importance of avoiding excessive sun exposure and staying hydrated during Grishma.
Good advice. I think we can all relate to feeling a bit overheated and sluggish when we spend too much time in the sun.
Yeah.
So after the heat of Grishma, what comes next?
Then we move into Varsha, or the monsoon season, which runs from mid-July to mid-September. This is a time of increased humidity and dampness, particularly in India, where the monsoon rains are prevalent.
Monsoon season.
Yeah.
That sounds like quite a shift. How does Ritucharya guide us through this period of intense moisture?
The key during Varsha is to counter the dampness by favoring warm, cooked foods, easily digestible grains, and spices that aid digestion. Think hearty soups, stews, and warming spices like ginger, cumin, and black pepper.
Warm soups in the summer.
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive, but I can see how it makes sense in terms of balancing out the excess moisture.
Exactly. It's about working with the qualities of the season, not just the temperature. And just as we adjust our clothing to protect ourselves from the rain, we can adjust our diet to support our digestion and overall well-being during this damp period.
That's such a great way to think about it. So we're not just blindly following rules, but we're understanding the why behind the recommendations and adapting them to our own needs and environments.
Exactly.
What comes after the monsoon season?
We transition into Sharad, or autumn, which spans from mid-September to mid-November.
Okay.
This is a time when the weather starts to cool down and the air becomes drier.
Okay.
Vata dosha tends to become aggravated again as we move away from the warmth and moisture of the monsoon.
Autumn, the season of cozy sweaters and falling leaves.
Yeah.
It sounds like a beautiful time to reconnect with nature. How does Ritucharya guide us to make the most of this season?
Sharad is the season of harvest, so the focus is on enjoying the abundance of nature while preparing for the colder months ahead.
Okay.
Think warming and grounding foods like root vegetables, hearty grains, and sweet, nourishing fruits like apples and pears.
Ah, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
It's interesting how each season seems to have its own unique set of flavors and textures.
It really does.
Yeah.
And these flavors and textures aren't just arbitrary.
Right.
They have specific properties that help to balance the doshas and support our well-being during each season.
So it's like a symphony of flavors perfectly tuned to the rhythms of nature. Okay, we've journeyed through 5 seasons so far. What's the final season in the Ayurvedic year?
Last but not least, we have Hemanta, or late autumn, which runs from mid-November to mid-January.
Yeah.
This is a time of transition as we move towards the coldest part of the year and prepare for the inward energy of winter.
It sounds like a time for slowing down and embracing those cozy winter vibes. What does Ritucharya recommend for staying balanced during Hemanta?
During Hemanta, it's all about nourishing and fortifying the body as we approach the coldest and driest time of the year.
Okay.
This means incorporating warming, grounding foods like root vegetables, hearty soups and stews, and healthy fats like ghee and sesame oil.
Okay, so embracing those warming, comforting foods that help us feel grounded and nourished during the colder months.
Right.
It makes sense. But I'm curious, how practical is all this in our modern world? I mean, most of us aren't living in rural India perfectly attuned to the subtle shifts in nature.
Yeah.
How can we realistically incorporate these principles into our busy lives?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Ritucharya.
Yeah.
You know, before the break, we were talking about how to practically apply this ancient wisdom in our modern lives, which, let's be honest, can feel pretty disconnected from the rhythms of nature.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Right.
We're bombarded with information, artificial light, and schedules that don't necessarily align with what our bodies and minds truly need.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap? Where do we even begin to bring this seasonal awareness into our lives?
A great starting point is simply noticing. Pay attention to how you feel in each season, physically, mentally, emotionally. What foods do you crave? What activities feel most nourishing? What helps you feel grounded and balanced?
Okay, so it's about tuning into our own internal cues and recognizing how they shift with the seasons.
Yeah.
But let's get specific. Say, for example, someone's listening to this right now, and it's the middle of winter. What are some tangible ways they can start incorporating Ritucharya into their routine today?
If you're in the midst of winter, think about those Vata balancing practices we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Incorporate warming spices like ginger, cinnamon, and cloves into your meals. Enjoy hearty soups and stews made with seasonal root vegetables.
Yeah.
And prioritize rest.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Permission to embrace those cozy winter nights and get some extra sleep.
Exactly.
Sign me up for that.
Yeah.
But speaking of real life, not everyone has the luxury of adjusting their sleep schedule whenever they please.
Yeah.
What about those of us who are juggling work, family, and a million other commitments?
Yeah.
Are there any bite-sized pieces of Ritucharya we can weave into our busy days?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even small adjustments can make a big difference. One simple thing you can do is bring the elements of the season into your home.
Okay.
So in winter, that might mean using warm lighting, diffusing grounding essential oils like sandalwood or cedarwood, or even taking a relaxing bath with Epsom salts and a few drops of calming lavender oil.
I love that. Creating a sanctuary that reflects the energy of this season.
Yeah.
It's like bringing the outdoors in, even when we can't physically spend as much time in nature.
Exactly.
But let's not forget about spring. What are some ways we can embrace Ritucharya as the weather starts to warm up and everything starts blooming?
Spring is a time of renewal and cleansing. Think lighter foods, fresh vegetables, and those bitter greens that help to detoxify after a long winter.
Okay.
It's a great time to experiment with lighter grains and incorporate more sprouts and fermented foods into your diet.
So it's about lightening up in all aspects, our food, our activities, even our mindset, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about those honey-based cleanses we talked about earlier?
Right.
Is that something someone might try during spring?
Absolutely. Spring is a traditional time for cleansing and detoxifying, and a honey-based cleanse can be a gentle and effective way to support your body's natural processes. You can find lots of resources online if you're interested in learning more about how to do a honey cleanse safely and effectively.
Great. And while we're on the topic of spring, what about exercise? Does Ritucharya have any specific recommendations for staying active during this time of year?
Spring is a great time to get moving as the energy of nature starts to rise.
Yeah.
Think gentle walks in nature, hiking, biking, or anything that gets you outdoors and enjoying the fresh air and sunshine.
I love that. Sounds like the perfect way to shake off those winter blues and embrace the vibrancy of spring.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about winter and spring.
Right.
What about summer? How do we stay balanced when the heat is on?
Summer is all about staying cool and hydrated, just as we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Favor cooling foods like cucumbers, watermelon, coconut water, and leafy greens. Avoid anything too spicy or heavy that might aggravate pitta dosha.
Makes sense. Those are definitely the kinds of foods I crave when it's hot outside.
Yeah.
And what about activities? Any tips for staying active without overheating?
It's important to avoid overexertion in the heat.
Okay.
Early morning or evening walks are a great way to get your movement in without overheating. Swimming is another fantastic option, as it's both cooling and refreshing.
Right.
And just being mindful of spending time in the shade, especially during the hottest part of the day.
Great advice. It's like Ritucharya is encouraging us to slow down and savor those long summer days instead of trying to cram in a million things. Now, what about monsoon season? For many of us, this isn't a season we experience directly, but it's still an important part of the Ayurvedic year. What do we need to know about it?
The monsoon season, while not experienced everywhere, is a great example of how Ritucharya encourages us to adapt to the qualities of our environment.
Oh.
During this time of intense humidity and dampness, the focus shifts to promoting warmth and dryness internally.
So even though it's still warm outside, we're shifting our internal thermostat, so to speak.
Exactly. Think of it as counteracting the excess moisture in the environment. This might mean incorporating more cooked foods, warming spices, and lighter grains like quinoa or barley into your diet.
It's fascinating how Ritucharya takes into account not just the temperature, but the overall qualities of each season. And it sounds like those warming, comforting soups we talked about earlier would be perfect for the monsoon season as well.
You got it. They're a great way to support digestion and combat the dampness.
Right.
As for activities during the monsoon, it's generally best to avoid anything too strenuous, as the humidity can make it more difficult for our bodies to regulate temperature. Gentle yoga, stretching, or light indoor exercises are good options.
Okay, so listening to our bodies and adapting our activities to the conditions.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And after the monsoon, as we move into autumn, what shifts do we need to make?
Autumn is all about embracing routine and preparing for the inward energy of winter.
Okay.
Think of it as a time to slow down, ground yourself, and nourish your body and mind.
I love that. I can already feel that shift towards a slower pace as the days get shorter and the air gets crisper.
Right.
What kind of foods and activities best support us during this transition?
Autumn is the season of harvest.
Hmm.
So enjoy the abundance of root vegetables, hearty grains, and warming spices like cinnamon and nutmeg.
Okay.
Apples and pears are wonderfully nourishing fruits to enjoy during this time.
Hmm.
As for activities, autumn is a beautiful time to enjoy nature walks, hiking, and other outdoor activities as the weather cools down.
Right.
It's also a great time to start incorporating more grounding practices like yoga, meditation, or journaling into your routine.
Okay, so connecting with nature, slowing down, and nourishing ourselves, all things that sound incredibly appealing, especially in our fast-paced world.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you said earlier, the idea of noticing how we feel in each season.
Yeah.
What are some specific things we should be paying attention to?
That's a great question.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a deeper awareness of your body and mind. Notice your energy levels. Do you feel more energized in the morning or evening? Okay.
What about your sleep patterns? Do you find yourself needing more or less sleep? How does your digestion feel?
Okay, so it's about tuning into those subtle shifts and patterns and recognizing how they change from season to season.
Exactly. And don't forget about your emotional state.
Okay.
Do you find yourself feeling more anxious or stressed during certain times of the year? Or maybe you feel more joyful and creative during other seasons?
I'm starting to realize that Ritucharya is about so much more than just what we eat. It's a holistic approach to well-being that encompasses our physical, mental, and emotional health.
It absolutely is. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the potential benefits of incorporating this ancient wisdom into our modern lives.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Ritucharya.
Yeah.
We've explored the 6 seasons and talked about practical ways to align ourselves with the rhythms of nature.
Right.
But I think it's time to address the big question. Why should we bother with all of this?
What are the real benefits of bringing this ancient practice into our modern lives?
It's a question worth considering.
Yeah.
And I think the answer goes beyond simply preventing seasonal sniffles or jumping on the latest wellness trend. Ritucharya offers a path towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and our connection to the natural world.
So it's about more than just physical health.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When we live in sync with nature's rhythms, we create a sense of harmony within ourselves.
Yeah.
This can translate to improvements in our energy levels, sleep, digestion, and even our mood and mental clarity.
Okay, so we're talking about a more holistic sense of well-being.
Exactly.
Right.
Imagine waking up each day feeling energized and aligned with the energy of the season. Your digestion feels balanced.
Yeah.
Your mind is clear, and you feel more resilient to stress. That's the potential of Ritucharya.
Those are some pretty compelling benefits.
Yeah.
It's like Ritucharya is giving us a roadmap to navigate the ups and downs of life with more grace and ease.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about working with the natural flow of life instead of constantly feeling like we're swimming upstream.
I think so many of us are craving that sense of balance and ease. But it's easy to get caught up in the busyness of modern life and lose sight of those natural rhythms.
It is. We're constantly bombarded with information,
Yeah.
artificial light, and a 247 culture that disregards the natural cycles of day and night, not to mention the seasons.
So in a way, Ritucharya is about reclaiming that connection to nature, even in the midst of our modern lives.
Precisely.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we are a part of nature, not separate from it. And when we live in alignment with those natural rhythms, we tap into a deeper source of wisdom and well-being.
It's almost like remembering something we've forgotten.
Yeah.
That innate connection to the natural world.
That's a beautiful way to describe it.
Right.
And remember, it's not about being perfect or adhering to rigid rules. It's about making small, mindful adjustments that support your well-being and bring you more in sync with the world around you.
So where do we start? What's one simple thing our listeners can do today to begin incorporating Ritucharya into their lives?
I encourage you to start by simply noticing.
Okay.
Pay attention to how the seasons affect you. What foods sound appealing?
Yeah.
What activities bring you joy?
Right.
And what helps you feel grounded and balanced?
Okay.
And then experiment. Try incorporating more seasonal foods into your meals.
Okay.
Adjusting your daily routine to align with the rhythms of nature.
Right.
And see what resonates with you.
I love that. It's about tuning in, experimenting, and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. Ritucharya is a personalized practice, so there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Ritucharya. We encourage you to explore this ancient practice further and discover how it can enhance your well-being. Remember, the wisdom of the seasons is available to all of us, waiting to be rediscovered. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.